Hi everyone! Today I want to talk to you about a topic that I haven't quite tackled so far, at least in this particular direction or angle, which is how burnout can occur for different Enneagram types and what the different causes for burnout might be depending on the 9 Enneagram types. So all about that in the next few minutes. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's dive in. Okay, so before I go into the Enneagram part, I want to talk to you a little bit about burnout as a concept. It's important to also understand really what it is rather than just using it as a buzzword before we proceed a little bit with the actual Enneagram part of the video. So burnout recently has actually been classified as exhaustion depression by psychologists. And the reason for this is because for a long time, people were using the word burnout, and psychologists were also using the word burnout. And it kind of tends to give people the impression, because of the wording, that it's something that you cannot reverse. Imagine having like a box of matches, and one of the matches gets burnt out. You can't really reverse that process, right? You can't get the match back to its original place. So this was happening also with people. And it was creating this impression that actually, if you burn out, then it's kind of like a situation that you cannot bounce back from. And in the last few years, this has been replaced with the term exhaustion depression to suggest the fact that it is a result of severe chronic exhaustion, tiredness, and it can have similar characteristics with depression, although it's not the same thing, and that's important to note. Usually burnout occurs related to work or as a result of work, although in some cases it can also come across or come up in other types of situations. Like, for example, a parent. After parenting too much, they can also experience burnout from their role as a parent. And this can also happen for people in different professions. You don't have to be a CEO or some sort of senior executive in order to experience burnout. Any person with any type of job, at any experience level, in any culture, with any gender, can experience burnout. Now, it usually creates signs on 4 different levels: on an emotional level, a cognitive level, a behavioral level, and also a physiological level. A few ideas about that. So on an emotional level, burnout usually brings symptoms like high irritability, anger, a tendency to struggle with trusting people, and as a result of that, having more conflicts in relationships, being a little bit more skeptical, and using more sarcasm than usual. On a cognitive level, burnout usually expresses itself as a tendency to have difficulty with executive functions. So this means having difficulty with planning things, with making decisions, with concentrating and really paying attention to what you have to do, with controlling yourself and having some sort of inhibitions, especially in situations where you need to have some sort of inhibitions. And as a result, there is a tendency to struggle a little bit with controlling your thoughts and the way you kind of perceive information and make decisions. On a behavioral level, things that we see as a result of these concentration difficulties and inhibition or control difficulties, people tend to be a bit more impulsive. They tend to be more likely to do things that are out of character, make rash decisions, say things that are not appropriate in the moment, use more sarcasm in their language. And we also see a tendency to get into fights more often because of the high irritability that they experience on an emotional level. Okay. Also, on a behavioral level, we see the results of the cognitive part. So if I can't concentrate, if I can't control myself, if I can't plan as well, I will be more likely to be late, to not finish my tasks on time, to really struggle with dealing with my schedule, and so on and so forth. And then on a physiological level, we see things like digestive problems because the stress really causes difficulties with digestion. We also see a tendency to experience insomnia, which of course exacerbates the level of exhaustion, difficulties with appetite, either eating too much or eating too little, and sometimes also like a lower immune system, because cortisol, which occurs quite a lot in burnout, has a tendency to impact the immune system negatively. So people tend to get sick more easily in these states. Okay, this is just a brief overview. There's more to say, but I wanted to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what burnout actually means. Now, how does this relate to Enneagram? I think the reason why I decided to talk about Enneagram rather than MBTI in this video is that because the Enneagram talks more about our fears, our insecurities, and the coping mechanisms associated with that, it's a bit better at explaining what can cause burnout. So I will go through all of the 9 types and list some of the most likely causes or patterns that will lead the 9 Enneagram types to experiencing burnout. But as a disclaimer, it doesn't mean that in all situations it will be like this, because, we don't just have our core Enneagram type. We have a wing, we have a tri-type, we have periods where we might be influenced differently by different people and situations. So things can be a bit more gray, but I'm just going to list the most prominent patterns. Now, starting with Enneagram 1, the perfectionist or the reformer. Obviously, the tendency to be extremely perfectionistic in what they do makes Enneagram 1 individuals very likely to burn out as a result of that, because we all know perfection is not really sustainable and it's not really realistic. So the extreme high standards that these people have cause these difficulties because they keep working, and it seems like they can never reach that level of perfection that they really want to reach. They are extremely harsh on themselves. Maybe out of all of the types, they are the most self-critical, and as a result of that, they burn out. I know quite a lot of Enneagram 1s in my personal life who burn out completely because of how much they try to make everything perfect. Now, moving on to Enneagram 2, the helper or the giver. Speaking from experience too, actually in 1970, when an American psychologist introduced the word burnout, he mainly referred to it as something that occurs in the helping professions, in people who are caregivers to others. Now, later, other psychologists said, no, it's not true, it can apply to anyone. But of course, I think this quite likely suggests the fact that Enneagram 2s are very susceptible to burning out as a result of their tendency to always try to please other people, to always try to help others, to go out of their way to anticipate the needs of others, and of course to not take care of their own needs, to not engage in self-care practices, because they might feel like, oh, if I take time for myself, when I have all these other things to do for my friends, family, coworkers, then that is selfish, and I cannot allow myself to be selfish. And this is a direct way to burn out. Been there, done that. It's not fun. Enneagram 3, the achiever. Again, it kind of suggested quite clearly that Enneagram 3 individuals have a tendency to overwork themselves like Enneagram 1, but the core reason is a little bit different. Here, they don't necessarily want perfection or all the details to fall into place correctly. Rather, there's such a pressure that they put on themselves to impress other people, to be the very best in what they do, and for these efforts to be visible, that obviously they will often put tremendous amounts of work, especially in their jobs, to make sure that they get the desired results, to make sure that they impress the people that they want to impress, and to validate their own insecurity about their worth as individuals. And of course, as a result, they are very likely to burn out. I think Enneagram 3 is probably one of the most likely types to be in top management roles, and I've seen a lot of them who are extremely burned out as a result of these behaviors. Now, Enneagram Type 4. I feel like here, this specific type has a bit of an advantage, because compared to many other Enneagram types, they tend to be a bit more in tune with their own feelings and needs, and might take a little bit more time for themselves. But of course, this does not mean that they cannot burn out as well. And a pattern that I noticed with Enneagram 4 is that they tend to be very easily overwhelmed by external demands. Usually they're quite socially introverted types. And when other people put pressure on them, especially in the professional world, they kind of move towards unhealthy 2 patterns, because their stress type, their disintegration type is type 2. But because they're more introverted than type 2, they become even more overwhelmed by these external demands, and then they get into this people-pleasing mode that is often associated with type 2. And that is a way for them to burn out. That is a way for them to feel like they have so much to do, it's impossible to finish everything. Okay, Enneagram Type 5, the hyper-rational or the investigator. Enneagram Type 5, similarly to Enneagram 1 and 3, because they're also competency-focused types, they also have a tendency to overwork themselves. But again, here, rather than being about perfection, rather than being about impressing other people, they are more interested in working hard in order to get very good at what they do, in order to feel safe. They are part of the thinking triad, which very much relates to safety, the need to protect oneself, the need to create an environment where they are able to create security and safety. And their specific coping mechanism is finding a way to be very good at what they do, niching down, becoming an expert, making sure that they have that stable, secure position. And they tend to overwork themselves in the sense of feeling like they are never experts, they are never good enough at what they do, they always need to get better. So there's some sort of perfectionism here as well, even though it's quite different as compared to Enneagram 1. Now moving on to Enneagram 6. Here, I would say the pattern is similar to an Enneagram 2 because Type 6 is also a compliant type. It's also a type that is very much focused on doing things for other people, sacrificing things for other people. But rather than doing it from the need of validation for their identity, rather than doing it in order to get love, like an Enneagram 2 often unconsciously does, Type 6 is more likely to do it out of a desire for security. And constantly giving to people around them and being reliable and consistent and loyal and going out of their way to carry out all of their duties and all of their responsibilities is a way in which Enneagram 6 kind of lies to themselves that they will always create safety and security. But of course we know that if you do not have inner security, inner safety, then you will not be able to really to feel safe and secure just by focusing on your external responsibilities. Enneagram 7, the enthusiast. Here, again, I feel like for them it's not usually so obvious to the external world that they're burnt out. They're probably one of the types that is the best at masking this tendency, because they often appear to other people to be really happy, excited, optimistic, enthusiastic, positive, all these kinds of things. But of course, on the inside, they can experience burnout at the same level that any other person, any other type can experience. Usually because they like being busy, they like doing many different things, they like exploring many different possibilities, trying this out, trying this out, trying this out professionally, but also trying this out and this out and this out in other personal life scenarios. And because they spread themselves into so many different directions, this can also be a cause of burnout when they overdo it. And why do they overdo it? Well, they overdo it because deep down they have a deep fear of missing out. And in order to create safety and security for themselves, they feel like they need to explore everything to make sure that they connect to all these different possibilities. Enneagram Type 8, the challenger. Now, 8s also are very susceptible to burnout because of how much responsibility they often put on their shoulders. They often have this internal narrative that, they are the assertive ones. They are the ones who are in charge. They are the ones who are capable of doing all of these difficult things, making all the difficult decisions, calling all the shots. And especially if they are in some sort of formal managerial position, they are even more likely to do so because they do feel like, I have a lot on my shoulder. Same with parents, especially if they have a larger family and they feel in charge and responsible for all their children, their partners, their households, and so on and so forth. They can become extremely susceptible to burning out because with all that energy that they have, they do so much and then they realize, oops, I overdid it. Now I have no more resources left. And they keep pressuring themselves even in that point. Okay, and lastly, Enneagram 9, the peacemaker. Again, with 9s, I feel like similarly to 4s and 7s, burnout is more of a flowy kind of topic. It's not as easy for the external world to point it out or to notice it when 9s are burnt out because they hide it better. They usually don't like showing it to the world, that they are in a bad mood or that they're experiencing negative things, and they often don't want to admit it to ththemselves even. They're also withdrawn types like 4s. They tend to be more introverted, so they're less likely to show it. However, it's extremely common for 9s to burn out as a result of avoiding conflict and doing things that they don't want to do. Let's say that they have a job, they're doing whatever it is that they need to do, but on top of that, other people ask them for favors, maybe family members, maybe friends, maybe other co-workers that ask them for things that, are not part of their job description. And 9s are very likely to not say no, especially if they feel like there's a potential for conflict. So they might take on more and more responsibilities due them out of this fear of conflict. Then they start experiencing resentment, and then they become extremely restless because of their need to complete all of these tasks. And also because 9s have quite a strong likelihood to procrastinate. When deadlines approach, they are usually faced with an overwhelming amount of work that needs to be done or tasks that need to be carried out. And sometimes that can even exacerbate the burnout that they're experiencing, especially if there are a lot of tight deadlines for a longer period of time. Okay, so these are my thoughts on what are the most likely causes for burnout in each of the 9 Enneagram types. I hope this was helpful to you. I hope there were a few insights that you could collect from this video and maybe start reflecting a little bit on yourself, your own patterns, and perhaps even on the patterns of people in your life that you care about. Again, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for being with me, and see you next time with another video on typology.